The first time Daniel Carter saw the fence, he thought it had to be a mistake. He'd just finished a 10-hour shift running a backhoe at a construction site outside Dallas, his muscles aching, his clothes caked in dust. His old Ford F-250 hummed down the county road, familiar fields rolling out on either side like an old song he knew by heart. This road always calmed him, the wide Texas sky stretching forever, the kind of open space where a man could finally breathe. But as he turned into his gravel drive, Duke, his German Shepherd mix, shot toward the truck, barking furiously, hackles up. That was unusual. Duke barked at coyotes, sure, but not at nothing. Daniel followed the dog's gaze and froze. There it was. A brand-new chain-link fence, silver and sharp, running across the southern edge of his property. He blinked, gripping the steering wheel tighter. The posts were fresh, concrete still damp at the base, the smell of it harsh and chemical under the warm evening air. He climbed out, boots crunching gravel, heart already pounding. Duke ran ahead, circling the strange barrier as if he couldn't believe it either. Daniel traced the line with his eyes. The fence didn't just cut along the edge. It boxed him in, section after section, curving until it joined another line of posts, funneling everything into one spot. A single black iron gate facing the subdivision across the road. He muttered under his breath, "What the hell?" From across the property line came the whine of a drill and the clang of metal. Daniel spotted two workers in neon vests securing another panel. One of them, a young guy with a patchy beard, looked up briefly. "Hey," Daniel shouted, striding toward them. "What do you think you're doing?" The worker adjusted his gloves. "Putting up a fence." Daniel's voice sharpened. "Yeah, I can see that. On my land." The young man shook his head. "Not ours to argue, sir. HOA ordered it. Talk to them." HOA. The word landed like gravel in his stomach. Daniel's ranch sat just outside Oak Valley, a gated subdivision filled with manicured lawns, golf carts, and people who waved at each other with the kind of smile that didn't reach the eyes. He'd bought his 30 acres precisely because it was not Oak Valley. Out here, he could let Duke run free, work his small herd of cattle, and live on his own terms without some board of retirees telling him the shade of paint he could use on his mailbox. But now their fence was here, standing on his soil. "You can't just box me in," Daniel snapped. "This isn't your jurisdiction." The worker shrugged again, clearly uninterested in a fight. "Look, man, we just built. You want answers? Go to the HOA office." Daniel stood there, fists balled, as the drill whined again. Duke barked like he wanted to tear the panels down himself. The fence gleamed in the fading sunlight, a wall that didn't belong, slicing through land his father had once walked, land Daniel had broken his back to keep. That night, Daniel sat at his kitchen table with a cold beer, staring at the paperwork spread before him. His deed, his survey maps, proof that this land was his. He felt the old ache of his father's words, echoing from years back. "Land is freedom, son. As long as you've got it, you can't be boxed in." And yet, he was boxed in. The next morning, he drove into Oak Valley, Duke riding shotgun. The subdivision was everything Daniel hated. Pristine sidewalks, identical mailboxes, flower beds clipped like they were sculpted. He parked outside the HOA office, a brick building with a polished brass plaque, and walked in, boots leaving dust on their polished tile. Behind the counter sat a woman in a blazer, hair pulled tight, smile practiced. "Can I help you?" she asked, though her tone already suggested she'd rather not. Daniel set his deed on the counter. "I own the Carter Ranch. Your guys put up a fence on my property." She scanned the papers, unmoved. "Ah, yes. The easement extension. According to our records, the HOA has jurisdiction over the access corridor. The fence is to ensure community safety and regulate passage." Daniel's jaw tightened. "Regulate passage? You fence me off my own damn land." She folded her hands neatly. "You can use the gate. Keys are distributed to approved residents." Daniel leaned in, voice low and dangerous. "I'm not one of your residents." Her smile didn't budge. "Then you'll need to apply for access." For a long moment, Daniel stared at her, blood roaring in his ears. Apply. To get onto his own land. When he left the office, the heat outside felt suffocating. He climbed back into the truck, Duke whining softly as if sensing his fury. Daniel gripped the steering wheel, knuckles white. They thought they could cage him in. They thought he'd bow, fill out their forms, wait on their permission like some tenant begging a landlord. Not a chance. As he drove back toward the ranch, the black gate gleamed in the distance like a dare. Something in Daniel hardened then. He wasn't about to let a committee of strangers decide how he lived on his own soil. If they wanted a fight, they'd damn well get one. And somewhere deep inside, a spark of defiance lit. Because if there was one thing Daniel Carter knew, it was this: land was freedom. And he was about to make sure nobody took that from him. The following week was hell. Every time Daniel pulled up to the gate, the metal bars mocked him, gleaming in the Texas sun. At first, the workers left it wide open while construction wrapped up, but once the fence was completed, they swung the gate shut with a heavy chain and a brand-new padlock. It clinked in the breeze like a cruel little bell. Daniel had to park outside on the county road and hike half a mile through scrubland just to get back to his own house. Duke ran circles around him, confused why the truck wasn't rolling in like usual. It wasn't just inconvenient, it was humiliating. On the third day, Daniel found a notice taped to his fence post. The HOA seal was stamped at the top, all neat and official. Access denied. Unauthorized vehicle entry will be reported. At the bottom, in sharp legal print, it read, "Contact Oak Valley Homeowners Association to apply for approved gate access." Daniel crumpled the paper in his fist, heat surging through his chest. That night, he called his sister, Angela, who lived 2 counties over. She was a lawyer, or at least, she'd been one before leaving a big firm to raise her kids. "You need to file an injunction," she said over the phone, her voice steady but tired. "If they've put a structure on your property, you can challenge it." Daniel paced his living room, Duke lying at his feet. "I don't have the money to fight them in court on. They'll drag it out for years. That's what HOAs do. They've got all the time and money in the world. Then what are you going to do? Just let them wall you in." Daniel stared out the window at the moonlit line of chain link cutting across his pasture. His father's words rose again. "Land is freedom, son." "No," he said finally. "I'm not letting them win. I'll figure something out." 2 days later, Daniel decided to confront the HOA board in person. The Oak Valley clubhouse smelled of lemon polish and money. He pushed through the double doors in his work jeans and flannel, earning a few sidelong glances from residents sipping Chardonnay by the pool. Inside, the board sat behind a long table like judges. At the center was a man in a navy suit, silver hair slicked back, a nameplate reading Charles Whitmore, HOA president. Daniel slapped his deed on the table. "This is my land. You've got no right fencing me in." Whitmore peered at him over rimless glasses. "Mr. Carter, we've reviewed the plats. The easement in question was transferred during a zoning adjustment in 2009. Oak Valley holds the rights now." "That's bull," Daniel shot back. "I've got the survey maps." Whitmore raised a hand, silencing him with practiced ease. "The matter has been settled. If you'd like gate access, you may submit an application and pay the annual fee. Until then, I suggest you respect community property." Daniel's laugh was sharp, humorless. "Community property? That's my damn driveway." A murmur rippled through the board members, but Whitmore didn't flinch. He simply folded his hands and said, "Meeting adjourned." Just like that. Like Daniel wasn't even there. That night, fury burned so hot in Daniel's chest he couldn't sleep. He walked the property under the stars, Duke padding beside him, the fence glinting like barbed silver snakes. Every clink of the padlock in the wind felt like an insult. He thought about cutting it. He thought about ripping the panels down with his truck. But he knew that's exactly what they wanted. A reason to call the cops. A reason to paint him as some dangerous outsider who couldn't follow the rules. And yet, rules were what they'd twisted against him in the first place. By the weekend, the pressure was unbearable. Every trip to the grocery store meant parking half a mile away. Every bale of hay for his cattle had to be hauled by hand. His truck sat useless outside the gate, sun baking the hood until it scalded to the touch. Neighbors began whispering too. He caught them watching from the edge of Oak Valley, couples in polo shirts and tennis skirts, whispering like he was some outlaw pinned in for their safety. One afternoon, As Daniel hauled a 50-pound bag of feed across the pasture, an SUV slowed at the gate. The window rolled down, and a woman with oversized sunglasses smirked at him. "Maybe if you'd just joined the community, you wouldn't have these problems," she called. Then she drove off, laughter trailing behind her. Daniel dropped the feed bag to the dirt, chest heaving. His hands shook with rage, but beneath it was something sharper, something clearer. They thought they had him trapped, but they didn't know Daniel Carter. The breakthrough came in the form of a for sale sign. Late one evening, Daniel drove past the far end of Oak Valley on his way back from the feed store. There, tucked between the tennis courts and a drainage ditch, stood a half-acre plot with a weather-beaten house, shutters hanging loose, yard overgrown. A sign out front read, "For sale, contact Whitmore Realty." Daniel pulled over, engine idling, staring at the sign like it was a message meant only for him. Whitmore Realty. Same Whitmore who'd just humiliated him at the board meeting. Same Whitmore who held the keys to the gate. And suddenly, like a puzzle snapping into place, Daniel saw it. The gate, the fence, the easement, all of it traced back to ownership of this tiny, neglected property, the one piece of land that sat directly at the choke point where his ranch met Oak Valley's border. If he owned that land, he'd own the gate. And if he owned the gate, a slow, dangerous smile crept across his face. Maybe, just maybe, he could turn their own rules against them. That night, Daniel didn't sleep a wink. He sat at his kitchen table with maps and deeds spread out like a war general plotting his next move. Duke lay curled at his feet, tail twitching in dreams, as Daniel scribbled numbers on a notepad, calculating every dime he had. Savings, overtime pay, the small inheritance his father had left him. It would be tight, damn tight, but it might just be possible. When the first streaks of dawn broke across the horizon, Daniel shut the notebook with a decisive thud. His path was clear. They thought they'd caged him, but he was about to buy the key. The realtor's office smelled of stale coffee and printer ink. A ceiling fan whirred lazily overhead as Daniel sat across from the agent, a young guy in a wrinkled shirt who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. "So, you're interested in the McAllister property," the agent said, flipping through a folder. "Depends on the price," Daniel replied, keeping his tone even. The agent rattled off a figure. It wasn't cheap, but it wasn't impossible either. Daniel kept his face stone still, though inside his chest, his heart was hammering. That was every last cent of his savings. No safety net, no cushion. "I'll pay cash," Daniel said. "Full amount." The agent blinked. You want to pay outright?" Daniel leaned forward. "I want it done fast. No delays. No HOA approvals. No board meetings. You understand me?" The agent hesitated, clearly not used to this kind of urgency. "Well, if you've got the funds, I don't see why not." By the time Daniel walked out of that office, deed in hand, the weight on his shoulders felt like it had shifted into something else. Something sharper. He wasn't trapped anymore. He was holding the very piece of land that held the choke point between his ranch and Oak Valley. 2 weeks later, the paperwork cleared. The McAllister place was his. That same afternoon, Daniel drove up to the black iron gate. A different SUV was idling there, a couple inside tapping impatiently at the keypad. When the gate swung open, Daniel eased his truck forward, and for the first time, he wasn't just passing through as an outsider. He stopped, climbed out, and inserted the new key into the control box. With a loud metallic click, the mechanism unlocked in his hand. Daniel smiled grimly. The gate was his now. Word spread fast. By the weekend, Oak Valley buzzed with gossip. Residents clustered on sidewalks, whispering in confusion, staring as Daniel's truck rolled through the gate like it belonged there. On Monday morning, the HOA board summoned him. The meeting was tense, the air thick with the scent of expensive cologne and indignation. Whitmore sat at the center, face pale with fury. "You bought the McAllister property," he demanded. Daniel dropped the deed on the table. "Every inch of it. That land is essential to the Oak Valley easement," Whitmore snapped. Daniel's grin was wolfish. "Then it looks like your easement just became my driveway." A ripple of outrage surged across the board members. A woman in pearls hissed, "You can't do this." "The hell I can't," Daniel shot back. Your rules say whoever owns the property controls the gate. Well, I own it now, which means the only key is in my pocket. He tapped his jeans, letting the jingle of the key echo in the room. For once, Whitmore had no words. His jaw worked silently, his face blotching red. The days that followed were sweet, but not easy. At first, Daniel allowed residents to pass through the gate as usual. He wasn't looking for war, just freedom. But Oak Valley didn't see it that way. Flyers appeared on lampposts, calling him a threat to community safety. Angry letters arrived in his mailbox, accusing him of sabotage. Then came the confrontation. One evening, as Daniel loaded feed bags into his truck, a crowd gathered near the gate. 20 or 30 residents, holding signs, chanting. Duke barked furiously as the mob grew louder. "Sell it back," one man shouted. "You don't belong here," cried another. "You're holding the community hostage." Daniel stepped forward, face calm but voice firm. "I'm not holding anybody hostage. I'm protecting my land. I didn't start this fight. You did when you fenced me in." Whitmore himself pushed to the front of the crowd, sweat glistening on his temple. "You can't keep this up, Carter. We'll take you to court." Daniel met his glare without flinching. "Go ahead. Drag me into court. But until a judge says otherwise, that gate belongs to me. You wanted control? Well, now you're looking at it." The crowd erupted again, but Daniel stood tall, Duke at his side, the iron gate looming behind him like a fortress wall. For the first time since this nightmare began, the power had shifted. That night, under the quiet blanket of Texas stars, Daniel sat on his porch with a cold beer, Duke stretched out at his feet. The fence was still there, slicing across his land. The padlock still clinked in the breeze. But now, every sound carried a different meaning. Because in his pocket, warm against his thigh, rested the key. It wasn't just metal. It was proof. Proof that he hadn't been beaten. Proof that his father's words still held true. Land is freedom. And for the first time in weeks, Daniel felt free again. But deep down, he knew Oak Valley wasn't finished. Not by a long shot. The board would come at him harder now, with lawyers, with bylaws, with every ounce of petty power they could muster. The fight wasn't over. The real war was only beginning. And Daniel was ready. The legal papers arrived 2 weeks later, hand-delivered by a nervous courier who wouldn't even meet Daniel's eyes. Oak Valley Homeowners Association versus Daniel Carter. Daniel flipped through the thick stack of documents at his kitchen table. They wanted him stripped of ownership of the McAllister property. They wanted damages. They wanted him fined for willful obstruction of community access. He almost laughed. They were throwing the whole damn book at him. Angela, his sister, drove down that weekend. She sat across the table, glasses sliding down her nose as she pored over the lawsuit. "They think they can intimidate you," she said. "But honestly, their case is weak. The deed's clean. You didn't break any laws." Daniel rubbed the back of his neck. "But do I have the money to fight this? They'll drag it out, bury me in motions." Angela's eyes softened. "Dan, sometimes you don't win by fighting their way. Sometimes you win by making them realize they've already lost." The showdown came faster than anyone expected. Court filings dragged on for a month, but in that time, Daniel played the quiet game. He didn't taunt the residents. He didn't block their cars. He simply lived his life, feeding his cattle, fixing up the broken-down McAllister place, mowing the grass around the gate until it looked better than Oak Valley's own grounds. And little by little, things shifted. First, a couple of residents started waving at him as they drove through. A week later, one of them stopped to thank him for patching a pothole by the gate. By the third week, a family even brought over cookies, muttering that they never liked the HOA's overreach anyway. Oak Valley wasn't a united front. It was cracks and whispers, fear and resentment. Daniel had lived long enough to know that bullies lost power the moment their victims realized they weren't alone. The real break came at the emergency HOA meeting. Daniel wasn't invited, of course, but half the subdivision showed up anyway, furious at the board. The lawsuit had drained tens of thousands from community funds, all for a case they were likely to lose. A young father stood up and shouted, "Why are we wasting money suing a man who owns the damn property fair and square? You boxed him in first." Another voice joined in. I just want to get to work without a gate code changing every other week. Carter hasn't stopped me once. And then, finally, someone said the quiet part out loud. Maybe the problem isn't Carter. Maybe the problem is this board. The vote came that night. By a narrow margin, the residents ousted Whitmore as president. Daniel only heard about it the next morning when one of his neighbors stopped by with the news. He listened in silence, then let out a low chuckle. For the first time, he felt the tide had turned for good. A month later, the lawsuit was withdrawn. Officially, the HOA called it a mutual resolution. Unofficially, they'd been forced to admit defeat. Daniel still owned the McAllister property. He still held the only master key to the gate. And Oak Valley, stripped of its most aggressive leaders, seemed to finally understand the message. Leave him the hell alone. On a warm Saturday evening, Daniel sat on his porch with Duke at his feet, watching the sun dip low over his pastures. The fence still stood, a scar across the land, but it didn't matter anymore. Because now, the gate wasn't a cage. It was a reminder. Angela sat beside him, sipping sweet tea. You realize, she said, you didn't just win. You outplayed them at their own game. Daniel shrugged, a small smile tugging at his lips. I didn't want a game. I just wanted to be left in peace. She looked out across the field. Think they'll try again? Daniel's eyes drifted toward the black gate, silhouetted against the twilight. They might, he said. But next time, they'll remember whose land they're walking onto. He leaned back, feeling the cool wood of the porch beneath him, the soft weight of Duke's head on his boot. For the first time in months, the knot in his chest loosened. His father had been right. Land was freedom, and Daniel Carter had fought like hell to keep it. And in the end, he hadn't just kept his freedom. He'd proven something bigger. You can fence a man's land, but you can't fence his will. The gate clinked softly in the evening breeze, like a key turning in a lock. Only this time, the lock belonged to him. If you enjoyed this intense story, smash that like button and subscribe for more gripping, cinematic tales. Don't forget to hit the bell so you never miss the next thriller. Your support keeps these stories coming.